I can't speak for you, but I can sure enough speak for me. I can't tell your business, but I can sure tell mine. He's been good. Yes, he has to me. Hallelujah. And for that, we give him praise. Hallelujah. We greet you with Jesus' joy. We thank God for the Trinity of his existence, God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We certainly want to thank God for our deacons and to all of those who are here today and to our viewing audience online. It's just good to be in the house of the Lord again. Amen. And I don't know about you, but I was glad when they said unto me, let's go to church. And so we are super excited to be in the house of the Lord one more time. Now, the Holy Spirit has summoned our attention to Daniel chapter 6, verse 13 through 17. Daniel chapter 6, verse 13 through 17. That's where we will attempt to preach from today, in the book of Daniel chapter 6, verse 13 through 17. And I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. But we invite your attention and your thinking there. Daniel chapter 6, verse 13 through 17 is where you'll find our text for today. We greet you, those who are watching online. Of all the great churches you could have stopped by or scrolled by, you stopped by the Bread House, and we are honored to have you online, whether you're a member, returning member, or a visitor. We greet you online as well. Daniel chapter 6, verse 13 through 17. And I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. And it reads like this. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. That word petition means prayer. Then the king, who, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to king, know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. And so then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the lion's den. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Verse 16 says, Daniel was thrown in the lion's den. The king declared, may your God deliver you. Daniel was put in the lion's den. The king says, may your God deliver you. I want to look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, my faith got me living risky. My faith got me living risky. Allow me to begin our sermonic dialogue with an interesting question. How far are you willing to go with your faith? How far are you willing to go with your faith? I believe that many believers have fallen for this fairy tale faith. This fairy tale faith that tells you you can have anything if only you just believe. This fairy tale faith cannot be trusted because it cannot be tested. A faith that refuses to be tested is a faith that should never be trusted. This fairy tale faith that we live by promises us everything without requiring from us anything. I'm going to say that again. I said this fairy tale faith that we have promises us everything without requiring us anything. But true faith is risky faith. True faith will lead you into some risky situations. True faith will lead you into some dangerous territories. True faith can lead you into some difficult situations and some difficult circumstances. True faith will lead you into some bad places. And truth be told, if you're in a great place, you don't need faith. Because everything you could possibly believe God for, you already have. But true faith is risky. We want a faith that leads us to still waters, but not a faith that leads us to the Red Sea. We want a faith that leads us to green pastures, but does not allow us to see the shadow of death. We want a faith that leads us to Christ without ever making us stop by the cross. We want a faith that comes without risk. But true faith, if you be honest with yourself, true faith and great faith will have you living risky. Yes, it will. It'll have you tithing when you really can't afford the little bit of money you got right now. True faith will have you praying to a God you've never seen, but just hope that He's going to make a way out of no way. True faith will cause you to be risky in applying for a job you know you don't qualify for. True faith will cause you to go apply for a car you know your credit don't give you for. But I believe true faith has the ability to lead you to risky situations. True faith will make you stay away from your divorce court and try to work on a marriage you see no hope in at all. True faith will lead you down the aisle of marriage and matrimony to the point to where you don't know what the future holds, but you do know who holds the future. True faith will have you believing, I've got a feeling that everything will be all right and all things around me are crumbling and falling apart. True faith will have you living risky. Yes, it will. And I'm not just talking about some of us in the building, but I'll call a few witnesses to the witness stand in the Bible. There are several characters who will testify that faith is risky. Come here, Peter. You remember Peter. Peter was in the boat in the middle of this storm with his fellow disciples, and he saw a man walking on the water. He called out to find out who the man was, and Jesus said, "It is I, be not afraid." And so Peter decided to put some risk behind his faith and said, "Lord, if it is you, let me walk on the water too." So his faith had him living risky. When he stepped out of the boat onto the water, I don't know if God changed the water or if God changed Peter. What I do know is that his faith had him living risky. How do I know it was a risk? Because when he took his eyes off the master and started focusing on his misery, everything began to change for him. Isn't it funny how our faith will have us living risky? Come here. You remember that woman with the issue of blood who had spent all the money she had, but she touched the hem of his garment because her faith had her living risky. You remember that widow woman who had nothing but little oil and a little meal in a barrel. She had her last meal for her and her son, and she decided that I am going to take this last meal, feed my boy, and we just gonna die in peace. And then she discovered a prophet showed up. He said, "Tell you what you do, bake yourself a cake, and while you at it, bake me one too. But when you serve me mine first." And she trusted God, even if she couldn't trust the prophet. So she did as he asked. Why? Because her faith had her living risky. Come here, Moses. You remember Moses, don't you? Moses was called from that burning bush to go confront the chaotic, the dictator, the mean and disturbing Pharaoh and say, "Go tell him to let my people go. Such matters would cause you to be killed and be severely punished by Pharaoh." But his faith had him living risky. I wish I had somebody help me preach up in here today. And in our featured text for today, Daniel invites our attention to his story on how his faith had him living risky.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for sermons, messages, and more.
Oh, Daniel. Daniel is the accredited author of this book, and he pens it during the time of Israel's captivity into Babylon. You must understand that Israel lives in Babylon now, but that is not their native land. They have been exiled from their native land, their promised land, because they were showing out. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When God delivered them out of Egypt, he promised them the land of Canaan. And when he promised them the land of Canaan, somebody knows that when God promised you something, he's going to give you what he promised. But the problem is that he delivered them out of Egypt, but he still hadn't got Egypt out of them. So when they get to Canaan, they finally get to Canaan and start showing out. Just like the rest of us do. When God do deliver you, when you pray and say, Lord, if you get me out of this, I'll never do it again. And when soon as he bring you out into the land he promised you, he bring you out, then you start showing out. I know I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about somebody that looks like you sitting in your seat. But I need you to understand that when he brought Israel out, they get to Canaan, and because they start showing out, God put them out. He brought them out. They started showing out, and he put them out. So they got held captive by Babylon. Babylon was that ruthless nation, but they held them captive, and Babylon would make them slaves to them. See, you got to be careful, because watch this. When God brings you out, your behavior should keep you out. Ooh, preach Pastor Jay up in here. But because their behavior didn't keep them out, he put them back in slavery, because clearly they hadn't learned yet. So they're in Babylon, and so this chapter 6 captures the iconic story where God proves himself to be the landlord as well as the Lion King. He proves himself that although Babylon is governed and owned by the Babylonians, he proves that I am the Lord of all land. He proves in this very statement, in this very chapter, that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and all that dwell therein. He proves that he is the Lion King. And so in verse 1 and 2, and I'll just give you a little context so it makes sense before we get into the meat of the matter. In the first 2 verses, Daniel's gift and lifestyle lands him favor with the current King Darius. Darius is the current king of Babylon. And so Daniel is even though he's an Israelite, he's an Hebrew, he's a Jew, he's also landed himself favorable circumstances with King Darius. His lifestyle, his gift had landed him favor. And so King Darius decided, I'm going to restructure the government of the land. And when he did that, he appointed 120 governors over the entire land. And over those governors, he appointed 3 administrators. Daniel had so much favor that he became one of the 3 administrators. He was over one of the 3 administrators then, but you move into verse 3 through 5, you'll find something very interesting here. In 3 through 5, Daniel had so much gift. He had so much intelligence. He had so much class. You do understand, Daniel was not just an ordinary man. Daniel was intelligent. Daniel had class. Daniel had smarts. He had gifts. And so his gift had put him in great positions. And so it was so great that King Darius considered promoting him to being over all the kingdom. He was going to make Daniel second in command. He's going to make Daniel second in command over all the kingdom. What we learn here is that our gift will make room for us. See, sometimes you ain't got to tell folk how great you are. Just continue to be godly. You ain't got to tell folk how good you are. Just continue to use your gift. Why is that important? Because your gift will make room for you, like it did for Daniel. And so after this, motivated by jealousy, the other governors and the other two administrators, they are angry and jealous. How Daniel gonna be promoted? You know, that's just like, I ain't saying there's nothing like that in our church, but just maybe some folks you might know that they get jealous when other folk around them are promoted. And it ain't like the person that's been promoted did anything wrong. It's just because they did everything right. So they promoted the king. Now watch this. The king hadn't promoted him. He just considered promoting him. Isn't it funny how folk be upset with you because of what God is considering doing for you? They couldn't, and so what they decided to do, they said, man, look, we got to find some scandal against Daniel. That's what I'm in the text. We got to find some dirt on Daniel. Because if we don't, this fool going to be promoted above all of us. And so they immediately went into survival mode to protect their egos. And they start to look for some dirt on Daniel. Start to look for some. Isn't it funny how when you get promoted, folks try to find a way to discredit who you are? You can get a promotion on your job. And now, mind you, they was fine with you until they would hang out with you until you got a promotion. And when you got a promotion, well, you know, she So these they start to look and try to find some scandal. And the problem was they didn't find nothing. But watch this. They couldn't find anything. They were motivated by jealousy. They couldn't find no dirt on Daniel. And so in verse 6 through 9, since they couldn't find his weakness, they decide to attack his strength. What is his strength? His faith, his belief, his unequivocal, unmovable, unchangeable trust in God. His faith. They could not find his weakness, and one of them had the smarts to say, well, attack his strength, his faith. And that's exactly what they did. So they go to the king and say to the king, hey, man, we've all met together. Wait a minute. How y'all all had a meeting, but you didn't invite Daniel? Let me pull over and park right here for a moment. Be careful. Don't credit everything on the meetings you are attending. You should be more concerned about the meetings you're not invited to. Ooh. It's the calls that happen after church that really should be concerning the church. It's the meetings that go on. It's when y'all leave the family gathering and the phone calls that are made after that. Oh, look at how y'all looking at me up in here. Those are the ones, the meetings you're not invited to are the ones you should be concerned about. So they go to the king and told lie number one, we've all met together and came up with a decree. Daniel wasn't there. So they came up with this. They said, King, we suggest to you that you make this law. They created a law that they knew Daniel could not obey. They said, they recommended that the king issue, watch this, a decree that no one is to pray to any god or mortal except King Darius. There ain't no King Darius going to be okay with this because he's the king. So they say, look, king, we suggest that for the next 30 days that no one pray to anybody other than you. And so King Darius says, okay, let's sign that. What a decree you guys have come up with. What a great idea you guys have come up with. And so King Darius issues and signs the decree. He also makes it non-negotiable. They push him and say, now look, because some decrees can make exceptions and make changes to them. He said, but we urge you that you make this decree, put your signet on it, which means that even you can't undo it. Ooh. Oh my God, your enemy, I'm telling y'all, your enemy has a way of trying to fix things where even the king can't get you out of it. But what you don't know about me is that I have a King of Kings that I submit to. So watch this now. So he issues this decree, and then Daniel gets in verse 10 through 12. Daniel learns about the decree that's been issued. Daniel learns about it, and yet he's remained faithful. He remains faithful to praying to God. Look at verse 11. Verse 11 shows that he did it in his house. Daniel had a habit. Every day, he'd pray 3 times a day to his God. That was his habit every day. And now this decree goes out that he's got to shift the focus of his prayers from his God to his king. And Daniel said, I don't think I can do that. And they instituted this law that Daniel couldn't follow. So Daniel said, well, I heard about it, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I think I need to pull over right there and tell somebody, keep doing what you're doing. I know everybody else is doing something different, but keep doing what you're doing. So Daniel, watch this. The text says in verse 11, it's ironic. The text says in verse 11 that he prays in his house, but they could see through his window. Because the verse 11 talks about how his prayer room was in front of a window that you could oversee Jerusalem, so they could see what he was doing. They saw him praying, and I got a problem with this, because how you got a problem with what's going on in his house? Daniel ain't went to the public store, to the local grocery store, and prayed out in the open. Daniel went home and prayed. Isn't it funny how you can be minding your business? Minding your business, and folk always got something to say about what's going on in your house. I know that's not y'all, I'm just talking about me. But it amazes me. Daniel ain't doing nothing but praying at home. And you got a problem with that too? Let me pull over and help somebody up in here. Baby, it don't matter what you do, folk gonna always have a problem. So they look and find Daniel praying and say, oh, we got him. Now, what trips me out, Unc, what I don't understand is how they know who he was praying to. If you wasn't in the house, because the text don't reveal that he was yelling it all out loud. So how they know what they assumed it. But they were correct. He was praying to God. So they said, oh, we got him now. They tried out. So they go to tell King Darius. And now King Darius is in a compromising position because he loves Daniel. He just promoted Daniel. He adores Daniel, but he also knows he's still the king. He also knows the signet that he placed on the situation. He knows that it cannot be undone. And so the text says, I think it's in verse 15, that it says he tried everything he was up all night. He worked all day trying to figure out a way to get Daniel out of this mess. And so after he couldn't find anything, he sentences Daniel to the lion's den. He said he couldn't help him, so he couldn't get him out of the jam, so he sends him to the lion's den, all because he was praying at home. Daniel is sentenced to death because he prayed in his own house. So Daniel's faith put at risk his leadership, his loyalty, and his life. I want you to write those things down if you're taking notes. His faith had him living risky with his leadership, with his loyalty, and his life. Look at verse 3. Look at verse 3. I want to show you something in verse 3. His leadership. He put at risk his leadership. In verse 3, then this Daniel became distinguished above all other high officials and satraps, those are governors, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. His leadership was at risk, because certainly you can't disobey a decree from the king and call yourself a leader. His leadership was at risk. And the text says Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials. He was a leader. He was a leader, and I mean an incredible leader at that. He was a leader of the leaders. He was a leader, and so the text says that he was distinguished above the other high office officials, and it don't just tell us what he was a leader of, but it tells us why he was a leader. The text says because an excellent spirit was in him. He was in a spirit of excellence. He operated distinguished. He operated in a spirit of excellence. Daniel didn't do things mediocre. He didn't have no that'll do mentality. Daniel did everything first class. Daniel was classy. Daniel was intelligent. Daniel was smart. Daniel was gifted. Daniel was anointed. And Daniel knew God. He wasn't just the average Joe. He was the real deal. And because there was an excellent spirit, watch this, it was in him. It's one thing for you to operate in a spirit of excellence. It's another thing for the spirit of excellence to operate in you. Preach, Pastor Jay. I'm trying as hard as I can. I said there's one thing for you to operate in a spirit of excellence, which means you're doing things in an excellent way. But it's a whole other thing. When the spirit of excellence is operating in you, it'll change the way you walk. It'll change how you talk. It'll change how you live. It'll change the way you give. It'll change everything about you. Why? Because an excellent spirit was in him. And the text says the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. His leadership was in trouble. His leadership was in trouble. His leadership was at risk. And his leadership was at risk. It was a problem. And I need you to understand that many of us will still choose our rank over righteousness. Many of us will still choose our rank over righteousness. What do you mean by that, Pastor Jay? I'm so glad that you asked. In other words, we will do the wrong thing just to keep our favorite position. We will neglect our morals just to keep our titles. Ooh. We will turn to immorality, neglecting the fact that we are still immortal. I need you to understand there's so many people, you don't know what folk would do just to keep their titles in church. Oh, they will throw away righteousness just to keep their rankings. And I need you to understand his leadership was in jeopardy, but not only was his leadership in jeopardy, but his loyalty was in jeopardy. Look at verse 10. Look at verse 10. I want to show you something. In verse 10, the text says, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. His loyalty was at risk. So you got to understand, the moment he read this decree, the decree is you can't pray to nobody else but the king. But his God said, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Now he's stuck between a rock and a hard place because now he has to choose between the loyalty to his God and the loyalty to his king. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Like us on Facebook at Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church.
What do you do when you have to choose between 2 great loyalties? Oh, it ain't like, it'd be so much easier if Darius was a horrible king. If Darius didn't find favor in him, but he had to choose between right and righteousness. Oh, wait a minute, Pastor, are you telling me there's a difference between right and righteousness? I'm so glad you asked. Yes, there is. Because somebody slap you in your face and you slap them back, that might be right. You ask me, I'm going to tell you, yeah. Slap me, I'm slapping you back. That's the right thing to do. My opinion. I know you're supposed to turn the other cheek, but what if I'm out of cheeks? Keep on slapping me, you're going to catch these hands. That's the right thing to do. But the righteous thing to do is something different. Because righteous means to forgive 70 times 7. Look at how y'all looking at me now, Pastor. You need to get off my road with that because I ain't really got there yet. See, right is one thing, but righteousness is a whole different thing. And so Daniel had to choose between what was right and was righteous. Daniel had to understand he had to choose between obeying the laws of the land and obeying the laws of the Lord. See, this is where we get in trouble. We love to throw that laws of the land thing around when we have to get out of something we really don't want to do for God. Preach, Pastor Jay. I'm trying as hard as I can. See what you must. So he had to choose between the laws of the land and the laws of the Lord. Pastor, what do I do when the two don't match? I'll tell you what you do. You better choose the laws of the Lord. So his faith put him in a dangerous position. Faith will make you choose what you are truly loyal to. Ooh, yes, it will. Faith will make you choose what you really loyal to. So anytime I believe in God for a new house, but I'm talking about the type of faith that'll cause you to not sin, even though the sin benefits you. See, we got faith. Let me tell you something that's hypocritical about us as believers. We got faith that believe God will make a way, but we don't have the faith that'll make us not sleep with somebody's husband. See, where's your faith when you need deliverance? Ooh, it's quiet up in here now. See, we don't want, Lord, I'm believing you to send a financial miracle, but you ain't believing God to shut that habit down you got. See, the same God that can heal your body can also heal your hearts. Oh, but we believe God for the stuff we want, but we don't believe God for the stuff we need. Oh, look at how y'all looking at me up in here. Daniel says your faith will make you choose what you really loyal to. Not only that, but faith will also reveal what you're really loyal to. See, many of us love God, but we're not loyal to God. Ooh, wait a minute, Pastor. You mean to tell me I can love God and not be loyal to him? Yes, you can. You can love him with all your heart and live for the enemy with all of your body. Yes, you can. You can love God and not be loyal to him, because when you're loyal to him, you will do everything he asks. Watch this, no matter what it costs you. He had to choose between being loyal to his leader versus being loyal to his Lord. And the last thing, and I'm done. Verse 16. He had to be loyal. His leadership was at risk. His loyalty was at risk. And his life was at risk. Look at verse 16. Verse 16 says, then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the lion's den. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. Since I can't deliver you, because I tried, may your God deliver you. His life was at risk. The moment he was thrown into the lion's den, his life was at risk. If you look at the text in verse 16, it says Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. Why is that important? If the text could have just said he was cast into the lion's den, but the text says he was brought and then cast. Ain't that what your Bible said? When they brought him, what that means is they brought him to the king's presence, and then the king had to send him to the den. This is very important because the king was the only one that could send someone to the lion's den. Even though they broke the law, the king is the only one that can make the punishment happen. So they brought Daniel to the palace, and the king had to do it. Why? Because the men that were trying to get him tripped up wanted to see him get punished. Oh, you got to be careful with people who always want to watch folk fall. Want to watch folk fall apart, looking for the scandal, always looking to see, ooh, what did they say? Did they fire him? Did they hire him? Did they punish him? You got to be careful with folk who want a front row seat to your despair. And I've discovered that God will keep you when your friends turn on you. Yes, he will. He'll keep you when they turn on you. The text says that the king declared it. That's how I know that he couldn't go to the den until the king said it. They did this, and this wasn't just about Daniel, but this was also about King Darius, because it broke King Darius' heart to send his best friend to the lion's den. I want you to know that some enemies don't have a problem with you. They got a problem with your relationship. Oh, when somebody really don't like you, since they can't affect you, they'll change the way others see you. I said they'll change the way other people see you, even though they don't like you. They can't do nothing about your status, but they'll change the way the king sees you. And so what they did was they made Darius sentence him to the lion's den. But oh, King Darius made a mistake when he says, may your God deliver you. I don't know, maybe Daniel wouldn't have survived had he messed up and said that. He said, may your God deliver you. And that's what I'm glad about, because won't God deliver you? Yes, he will. And if you don't believe me, there's proof in the text, because the text says that they threw him in the lion's den, right? Now, I need to pull over right here and remind you of something that Uncle Mike told me the other day. There are two types of people in the lion's den. There is Daniel, but then there are lions. And when we've studied the Bible, we must search to find ourselves in the text. And most of us would try to identify with Daniel. But what if you are the lion? What if you're the one that's sent and used to destroy what God built? Ooh, look at how y'all looking at me up in here. See, too many of us reading this text like, ooh, look at me in the text. I'm Daniel. No, baby, you got lion tendencies. Oh, you ain't, oh, look at how y'all looking at me. I need some of you to understand that you're not Mufasa, you Scar. Mm-hmm. Oh, y'all ain't watched The Lion King? Well, come on, follow me now. See, some of us, you need to understand that some of us are not the Lion of Judah, but some of us are that roaring lion that goes seeking whom he may devour. Preach Pastor Jay up in here. Everybody ain't Daniel. But you got some lion tendencies with your lion self. Preach, Pastor Jay. I'm trying to help somebody up in here. But then in verse 18 and 19, oh, everything changes. Look at verse 18 and 19. You'll discover the text says, then the king went to his palace and passed the night, watch this, fasting. Now who praying? Wait a minute. Who you praying to? Didn't you just send out a decree that we can't pray to nobody else but the king? Oh, but when you touch God's anointed one, it'll have you praying to the God. Oh, my God. Can I tell you something? Stop getting mad when your enemies pray for you. Maybe they feel guilty, and maybe God has shown them you touched the wrong one this time. Text says in verse 18 that he prayed, he fasted all night. Neither were his instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went with him. You understand? In Bible days, the kings would have music brought to them when they're stressed. Music has always been a stress reliever. It definitely is for me. Depending upon how mad I am, that'll determine what playlist I choose on my iPod. And usually, if I'm just being transparent, on Sundays, after I get done with all the church, I don't want to hear no gospel music. I know y'all gonna judge me, I don't care. But because some of y'all don't listen to it either, all the time. Oh, I'm on your Facebook page. I can tell you don't listen to it all the time, okay? So don't judge me. But there are certain moods that I'm in where I want to hear me a little Frankie Beverly and little Earth, Wind, and Fire. I don't really like all this new stuff that's out now. This, all this new stuff. I ain't really feeling it. I'm not really messing with it. But what I want you to understand is that music has always been our safety place, our mood changer. That's why you got to be careful what you listen to, because certain vibes and certain grooves can cause certain situations to happen. That's why I don't really like Blue playing certain things in church, because it make me feel some kind of way, and I don't really think I'm supposed to feel that kind of. Look at how y'all looking at me. But certain songs that got a certain sound to it, and certain sounds bring about certain. So music has always been a stress reliever. And so when the king was going through, he'd call his musicians in. He'd call his musicians in to play. And the text says he was going through so bad, he didn't want to hear no music. Cut the music off, because I'm in so much trouble. I don't need to hear nothing but God. The text says he sent them away from him. And verse 19 says, then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. He couldn't sleep all night. As soon as the sun came up, he ran to the lion's den. He ran to the lion's den. He couldn't sleep all night. Don't worry, because you up all night worried about your enemy. Because God will have your enemy all up all night worried about you. Ooh. Oh, but this is the part I love. Let's ride, Blue. I need you to understand this. Look at verse 21. Verse 21 changes everything. The text says, then said, the king gets to the lion's den, right? He gets to the lion's den. And when he gets to the den, he calls Daniel's name. Daniel, Daniel, where you at? And verse 21 says, then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. Hold up. He calls Daniel from the den. And the first thing that comes out of Daniel's mouth is reverence to the king that cast him in the den. I don't know about y'all, but I would have been praising my God instead of giving reverence to this king. But Daniel teaches us that it's always good to be in order before you be in celebration. Ooh. Ooh, Jesus. He teaches us that I should never, even in my praise, ought to still be in order. Ought to still be in order. But here's what I like about it. In verse 22, he says, my God hath sent his angel and hath shut the lion's mouth, that they may have not hurt me. In other words, he says, don't worry about how I'm doing, because the lions are suddenly no longer hungry. He says that the lions' mouths were shut. Mm-hmm. What do you mean the lion's mouth was shut? I used to think that he was saying that the lions, literally, their mouths were shut. But what I learned in the text is that the lion's mouths were never closed. But the word shut in the Hebrew means no longer hungry or have an appetite. And I want to tell somebody in the building that your enemy no longer has an appetite for your demise. I found that Jesus got a way of shutting your lion's mouth. And I found that Jesus can shut your lion's mouth. What do you mean, Pastor? I said, Pastor, Lord, how did you shut the lion's mouth? And he said, you do know that I'm not just the Lamb of God, but I am the Lion of Judah, and I can speak, lion talk to. Yes, is there anybody here can stand up and testify that the Lion of Judah won't he keep you? Won't he keep you? You can be in a risky situation, but God, won't he keep you? Say yes, won't he do it? I've got a feeling that everything is gonna be all right. How do you know, Pastor? How do you know that the lions are going to be quiet? How do you know that when you come out, your enemies won't come for you again. I'm so glad that y'all asked. Look at verse number 24. And the text says, and the king commanded that they raise the men that accused Daniel, cast them into the lion's den. But watch this, just not the men, but their wives in the lion's den, their children in the lion's den. And I said, Lord, why would you punish the families of these corrupt men? And he told me, I need to kill everything that might kill my Daniel. Yes, yes. Is there anybody here can stand up and testify that God will take care of your enemies? Good evening, y'all. May the Lord bless you real good. But I've got to close here now. But the text says, it keep getting gooder, ain't Holly? The text says, when he threw the men and the wives and the children in the lion's den, the text says they couldn't even get in the door real good before the lions suddenly got hungry. Yeah! I'm so glad that you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Stop cussing out your enemies. Stop shooting your enemies. Just wait on the Lord. He shall. Yes, he will. I got one more thing I need to show y'all in the text. And I found it in verse 26. You remember there was a decree in the text. They couldn't pray to nobody else. But look at what happens in verse 26. He said, I King Darius, issue a decree that in all of my royal dominion, people must tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. That's why you were put in the den, so God could become the Lord of the land. King Darius is the landlord, but God is the Lord of the land. Somebody, anybody, everybody, lift your hands and say, Lord, I thank you. Lord, I thank you. Yes, yes, yes. No wonder Paul said, every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that God is, God is, God is. My faith got me living risky. It's got me taking chances that I ordinarily wouldn't take. But can I tell you, with every risk, there is a reward. With every risk, there's a reward. I don't know who I'm talking to, but somebody about ready to give up right now. And I need to tell you, even if your faith lands you in the den, I don't know how, I don't know when, but you coming out of this. Oh, I wish I had somebody. I don't know who I'm talking to, but you coming out of this. I don't know if God's going to change the lions, and even if the lions eat you, they might have to spit you back out. I don't know, but what I do know is you coming out of this. You coming out of this without no bite marks, no scratches. And the text don't say it. The text don't say it. But some scholars suggest, Uncle Mike, that Daniel slept on the lions. Why is that important? I need to prophetically announce to somebody, God gonna let you sleep on what's trying to kill you. Ooh. Watch this. The king gonna be up all night, but you're gonna get some rest. Stop worrying about your haters. Your faith got you living risky. Oh, but the reward is so much worth the risk. Listen, I don't know who this is for, but listen, they gonna judge you with the decisions you made. You may decide, I'm gonna try something, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna start my own business, I'm finna start dating again, I'm finna start doing this. It ain't gonna make sense to nobody else. Folk gonna be looking at you. I have to deliver myself from common sense folks that always got a logical explanation for why I shouldn't do what I'm doing. But see, my faith got me living risky. It got me sowing seeds that I can't even afford to sow. It got me buying stuff I can't even afford to buy. It got me looking at folk. It got me believing in folk that I know ain't gonna do nothing, but I've got a feeling, like grandmama said, everything gonna be all right. Bethlehem, when you but I didn't tell y'all, when you hired me, I was terrified. I've been a preacher for a long time, but I never pastored. I said, Lord, I've done my homework on this church. They're a great church. Lord, you really couldn't send me somewhere where I could practice before I could come to such a great church like Bethlehem. He said, when have I ever done anything that made sense? And I learned then at that moment, faith gonna have you living risky. It's gonna have you going home when you wanted to leave home. Faith will have you trusting God that even while you divorced, you're gonna be all right. Because it'll have you living risky. It'll have you going to school knowing you can't pay for it and knowing you ain't been in school in 20 years. Whew. Can I tell y'all a secret? I ain't been to school in, I know, at least 20 years. But on a scale of 5.0, my grade point average is 4.8. And I still don't know how I'm going to pay for the rest of my education. But my faith got me living risky. I don't know who that's for this morning, but take a chance on God. You done took a chance with everything else. You done been down to the boat and took a chance. You've been to the casino and took a chance. You married your spouse, taking a chance. You divorced your spouse, taking a chance. Try Jesus, because your faith will have you living risky. Your faith will cause you to reduce the hours at work so you can serve in God's house. And it'll cause you, have you looking all kind of crazy. But God says in his word, for my God shall supply. Your job ain't it ain't the source, it's just a resource. Somebody's thinking about retiring. I want you to know, your faith gonna have you living risky. I'm prophesying to you now, whether you hear it or not. Somebody thinking about retiring and you worried about how your money gonna end, and God told me to tell you it's a risk, but I'm the reward. Because your job ain't never took care of you like I will. Whoa. Somebody worried about how much money they got in the bank. I tell you something else, your bank account ain't never took care of you. Because the Bible says he will open up the windows of heaven and just keep pouring and keep pouring and keep. Somebody too terrified to fall in love again. So you're going to stick to what you already know because you too scared to take a risk with God. But can I tell you something? Faith will have you living outside your comfort zone. It'll have you not caring about what folk got to say. It's amazing how folk that don't pay no bills at your house, they don't put nothing in your pocket, always got something to say about the decisions you made. Your faith has you living risky. To someone online, someone here in person, I invite you to take a chance on God. Take a chance on God. Stop praying about it. It's time to take the risk. What did Pastor say? I said stop praying about it. It's time to take the risk. Oh, you've been thinking about it for a year. You've been thinking about it long enough. It's time to take, I don't know who I'm prophesying to up in here. It's time to take, stop worrying about what they got to say, because they ain't going to help you no way. They ain't going to help no way. Take the risk. Here's what I learned. Everybody asking me, Pastor, you going to get the vaccine? I've heard mixed reviews. Some people say, I ain't getting the vaccine. And then some people say they're going to get the vaccine. What I do know is this. Whether you take it or don't take it, we covered by the blood. Need you to understand, take the risk. My faith got me living risky. If you're watching online, I want to pray with you. I want to pray with you that God gives you the courage and the audacity and the unmitigated gall to do what you've never done so you can get what you've never had. Try God. You done tried everything else. Try God. Somebody needs to get saved. Whether you're here in person or online, get saved. Ain't no point in talking about trying Jesus and faith if you don't know Jesus. Accept him as your Lord and Savior. Maybe you know Jesus. Maybe you know him. Maybe you know him. Maybe you don't. I don't know. Maybe you know Jesus and you just need a church home. We invite you to the Bread House to come as you are and stay as you grow. You don't need to get ready. Just come just like that. Just like that. Just come just like that, just like that. You don't have to get dressed and get pretty and buy nothing. Just come on, just like you are, just like you are. And then stay so you can grow. Maybe you got a church home and you are saved. You want to get baptized. You can come. Maybe you are baptized, you got a church home, you are saved, but you need someone to partner with you in prayer, to empower you, because you're about to take a risk and a chance of a lifetime. You want somebody to partner with you in prayer, you can come. Send us a message online. Send us a message. Or if you're here, you can come. We invite you. It's time to step out on faith. You've been playing with this and praying about this for so long. When you gonna do something? It's time. Soon as I stop worrying how the story ends, I let go and I let God. Let God have his way. That's when things start happening. I stop looking at back then. Oh, I let go and I let God. Let God have his way.
To support our ministry or anything Bread House, donate on Givelify. Download the Givelify app and look for our logo. With a few clicks, you'll be set up to give on the go. Thank you for your support. See you next time.